What's up, guys? Welcome back or welcome to our show called Behind the Mask. It's just Chris today. We are continuing our Unlearning series talking about coaching in this regard. We've been talking a lot about unlearning from athletes, from your life in sport to life after sport. Now we're putting a little bit of a twist on it and talking about unlearning of athletes, and then you've transitioned into coaching and what things do translate well and what things don't. So today we've got a behind the mask veteran in Casey and a behind the mask rookie in Morgan. I'm going to let those guys introduce themselves. So whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Perfect. I'll go first. My name is Morgan Roll. I'm originally from Maryland. Ended up playing my college career at LSU and then started my coaching career at Loyola University, Maryland, and I'm now at Northwestern University. Just came up on my second year, which is crazy to think about that. But yeah.
Awesome. My name is Casey Dockery, and currently work full-time with Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Philadelphia. I'm from the Philadelphia area, played lacrosse, and I coached lacrosse a year in England after college, 2 years of club lacrosse, and then 7 as the head lacrosse coach at Dickinson College. Yeah.
Awesome. So good to have you guys. So we finally have a laxer on here. I feel like people are always get mad at us because we always have soccer and softball or something. We never have anybody from lax on here. So awesome to have Casey in here. So I would love to hear from you guys. You guys kind of share where you've been coaching, but Morgan, we'll start with you. We'll just go with that. What has been your journey to coaching? How'd you get into it? How's it been for you up until this point?
Yeah, I started coaching a little bit just on the side when I was in high school and even in college. When I was in college, the demise of my playing career is kind of what led into my coaching career, which I feel a lot of people relate to that. When I was at LSU, I battled a bunch of different injuries while I was there. And then that ended up with me being medically disqualified my junior year. Our coaching staff at the time asked if I wanted to come on my senior year as an undergraduate coach, which was just a glorified kind of manager, which I was perfectly fine with at the time because it was a really good like closure to my playing career. And I was still with my team and still kind of in like a half space of seeing the ins and outs of I'm not quite an athlete anymore, but I'm also not like a full-time coach. So it was an amazing opportunity. I'm super thankful for them. But at that point, I was incredibly just bitter at my experience at soccer, at how it had mapped out. And then that summer I had worked a goalkeeper camp and kind of started to like get back in the swing of things of like rediscovering my love and passion for the sport and kind of saying that it wasn't the sport that I was bitter about. It was just how mine kind of ended. And that love and that discovery that kind of reignited at that time sort of launched me into coaching. And my former coach at LSU had found his way to Loyola University, Maryland, and gave me a call and was like, hey, I saw you're back in town. Do you want to coach our goalkeepers from a volunteer role? And again, was not quite sure what to expect. Never really thought of it as a career. Got into it and was just like engulfed by how just incredible the opportunity was and the role was. And then became full-time there, was there for 4 seasons. 1 as a volunteer, 3 full-time, and then had the opportunity at Northwestern and would like packed up everything, moved up Chicago, knew nothing about anyone up here, anything up here. It's cold currently. I've found that out pretty abruptly. And then now I'm here and I'm thankful for this opportunity for sure and growing within my coaching. So long-winded kind of journey there, but I feel like all important parts to what we're talking about here soon.
Yeah, for sure. There's some parts in there I 100% want to touch on, but I'll let Casey share your coaching journey with us before we get into it.
Sure. I had plans of going to grad school after graduating from Franklin and Marshall, and I applied to 10 grad school programs and got 11 rejection letters. Penn was like, we really, really don't want you. Sent me 2 rejection letters. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had passed by this advertisement every day on our locker room door to coach lacrosse through the English Lacrosse Association. And so I applied, and my friend Sarah also applied. And so we got a chance to be placed in a private school in England. And I coached the 9th grade team myself. So I was the head coach of that team, and then was the assistant of the varsity, and I got to travel and play lacrosse at a really high level in England. And so that was awesome. But I still think I felt the social pressure from like the people that I went to school with to go and get, I don't know, some sort of high level job. Like I sort of felt like coaching wasn't good enough. And so I moved to Boston and took a position in a market research firm, but found Brandeis Lacrosse and they were club. And so I was able to work it out with my company to leave early and coach them. And that was a lot of fun to try to build that program. And then I got a call from my college coach and she was like, hey, a position in Pennsylvania just opened. They're like one of the worst D3 programs in the nation. But I think you could have a shot at getting the head coaching job. And I was 25 and I was like, if I'm going to do this, let's do it. And there were some other personal reasons that I wanted to move back to Pennsylvania. And so I applied and at 25 years old, got the head coaching job at Dickinson. And I think I really went into coaching because I loved so a little bit different from Morgan, like I loved my 4 years and I really loved my coach that I played for my last 3. And I wanted to provide that same opportunity for other women that my coach provided for me, that she just taught me a ton of life lessons and made the game really fun. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I love building. So even in my job now, that's what I do. I like to build stuff and I like to kind of rally people around a big vision. And so to take one of the worst teams in D3 on at 25, I was like, let's go. And it was an interesting journey, to say the least.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, so I'll share a little bit about my coaching journey up until this point. So obviously, me and Morgan coach goalkeepers. We have the distinct honor of coaching the weirdest people on the team in every team. And we fully embrace it. Let's go.
Absolutely.
But, let's go. But so I got into coaching in high school. I got to train at the Keeper Institute in South Jersey. We coach, kids age 8, well, now 7, all the way up to pro. And I started coaching there because Joe kind of was like, hey, you can help us with sessions in exchange for having to pay for training. So it was a cool, just like, good deal, 1-to-1. Like, yeah, I get to help with programmings and I get to train for free. It works out. And had kind of, sparked this interest in wanting to coach. I'm obsessed with all things competitive. Casey knows I'm like ridiculous about it and injure myself regularly now that I'm an old head. But so that's kind of what it was. And then, going into college and getting to learn more and more about the tactical side of the game, not just coaching goalkeepers technically, but more about systems and how you can, encourage your team to manipulate's the wrong word for it, but kind of outsmart the team that you're playing against. I was like, let's go. That had my brain firing in a bunch of different ways. So I got to be a goalkeeper coach all throughout college. And then once I was graduated, weirdly, after my last quarter at Drexel, I was now the freshman coach at Cherry Hill West. Cherry Hill is purple. Don't let anybody tell you different. And I'm going to get in trouble. Whoever listens to us is from Cherry Hill East. I'm going to get in trouble, but I don't care. It's fine. But so I got to coach the freshmen and the goalkeepers there, which freshman soccer players in high school were just an interesting bunch. Had so much fun and got an opportunity to see coaching from an interpersonal side now, not just like an assistant that says, hey, tweak this tactically, or just to get to coach the goalkeepers. I got to being responsible for a full team for like the first time ever. As a youngin. So it was cool. I was participating in that. And then the assistant coaching job or the goalkeeper coaching job at Drexel opened up and I was like, I'll apply, and I'm an alum. I never left. Why not? And coach was like, yeah, let's do it. So I was doing a number of things. I was doing that, was coaching at TKI, and I was like volunteer assistant coaching the goalkeepers at West. It's been a cool experience. Now I'm still currently a keeper coach at TKI when I can be. I've gotten a character coach for basketball at West. I've gotten to, and I'm still the assistant coach or the goalkeeper coach at Drexel. So fun times in college. There's a lot of things from both of your guys' journeys that I think really stuck out to me. But the first thing I want to ask you guys in the spirit of our Unlearning series is, what is one thing, we'll start with one thing each. I'm sure there's a bunch of things, but what is one thing that you've had to unlearn when you transitioned into coaching that maybe was really successful, made you a really successful athlete, but maybe does not translate as easily into coaching?
I can go real quick. I feel like for me, the biggest thing was the transfer of like control. Like as a player, like especially as a goalkeeper, where you are like you joystick, you can communicate, you have impact within it, like you can control the tempo, and that control aspect, that was something that I prided myself in within my game, like my presence as a goalkeeper, my communication as a goalkeeper. And then I feel like when you transition to the coaching aspect of it, it's like you want to create some form of autonomy within them that they take over, and you're not just joysticking them through the ins and outs of it. Like you want to create an environment where they're making that decision and problem solving. And for me, like having to like step back and be like guide them in that process of learning how to guide them to do that was something that I had to like abruptly unlearn. Otherwise it was going to be we would have some little robot goalkeepers that I'd be working with, because it would just be them regurgitating what I was saying and not actively seeing something and wanting to respond in a way that they saw fit. So that was probably one of the biggest things for me as I transitioned.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's definitely the biggest thing, particularly with being an athlete, where they're like, take ownership for your development, take ownership for this, take ownership over this. And now you're a coach, and we like to think that we have control over the outcome, but we don't. So the hope is that, you know, our role kind of shifts from being this athlete where it's like, okay, especially as a goalkeeper, and I'm sure in lax too, where it's like, all right, you are uniquely responsible for whatever you do, whatever is in your control, like that's you're responsible for it. Now, athletes have an unrealistic expectation of what's in our control, but that's a different discussion altogether. I do think that it's different now when you're a coach, and I've seen that frustration in myself where it's like, hey, like just do it this way, but I need to, because you get frustrated by two things. Either they don't do it the way, like it might seem obvious to you, but if they just do what you told them to do, it's like, hey, like there's a million different options. Why didn't you choose them? So yeah, sitting in this in between of like encouraging your athletes to be autonomous, like you said, but also wanting them to think like you think is hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, Casey, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, control is definitely the word. When Morgan said it, I'm like, it's 100%. When I think about it as an athlete, my input generally equaled my output, right? So whether it was off-season training and how hard I worked, then I could see those results on the field, or even in a game, like we could be losing, but I can hustle my heart out, and it's still, you know, I still am like getting out of it what I want. As a coach, my input, I could game plan, I could prepare them. At the end of the day, you're talking about group psychology and then individual psychology, and you do not have control. And so I think for me, it was recognizing that I'm going to do my best to prepare them. And then you have to let go that they have to do it. And that was a really hard transition and a really hard unlearning, because I think a lot of people who go into coaching are control freaks. We like strategy. We want to plan, and it's probably the worst profession if you're a control freak, because you have the least amount of control, especially in a team sport. So yeah, I think that was the biggest unlearning for me.
Yeah, so good. I mean, it's 100% accurate. Like if you want to be able to control everything, you should not coach, because you know what you should do? Go play NBA 2K for the rest of your life. Go be an esports professional, because you get to just control whatever your athletes literally control. Like you talked about joysticking. I love that visual of like, you get to literally pluck them out of whatever you need them to do and tell them to do every single little thing. And that's just it's not translatable, especially the higher the level goes. And when you work with adults, and your job kind of shifts from being a coach, so to speak, to being a manager. And it's just different versus if you're coaching like a little 7-year-old, you are like trying to critique every little thing. With adults, it's like you're doing a lot more interpersonal managing than you are actually coaching the technical elements of their thing, of whatever they're doing. So my follow-up question to that, and this kind of had to do, Morgan, with what you were talking about with your story into coaching. I feel like a lot of times people get into coaching to almost fill a void that playing left, or to like relive your glory days or try and live vicariously through their athletes. So I'm wondering for you guys why that is probably super problematic for coaches to step in and be like, well, I didn't get to do all of this as an athlete, so maybe I can do it as a coach. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I feel like as a coach, if you want to be in it for the long run, like being selfless is such a core aspect of that. So if you're getting in it for the just transition aspect of coming from, okay, I didn't meet X, Y, and Z as a player, now I want to meet that as a coach, like, and I'm doing it for like my glory, and I'm gonna like, because I was the mastermind behind all of it, like you're not gonna be in it for a long a long stretch, in my opinion. And pretty candidly speaking, like for me, like as I transitioned, again, I didn't think of it as a career at that point, just because I didn't see if that was even something that was like realistic. So a lot of it in the beginning was like super therapeutic to me as a transition. So like I feel like there's that aspect of it. And there was definitely parts of it, like when I got into it and you start to understand your role and understand like what your impact can be, and you really start to dive into your coaching philosophy and like your why. Like we talk about that a lot as our coaching staff. We just had a meeting the other day where we sat down and went over our whys. Like as you transition into that aspect of it, and it's like a therapeutic thing, like that's the, I feel like, quote unquote right way to do it. But I didn't know that initially, and I didn't know that coaching was gonna be what it's been for me, and I'm super thankful that it found me or I found it, in whatever way we kind of want to say, chicken or the egg there. But
What do you think, Ace?
I definitely think it's problematic to go in and try to live out a dream that you didn't accomplish. And I think it's interesting, this idea of your why. And you know, if you'd asked me at 25 what was my why, it was, I really wanted to give the same experience that I had to other people. I loved the game. I wanted to be around the game. I wanted to share knowledge, and but I also wanted to win. And at 25, I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I wanted a little bit about me. I mean, it's sort of like, I think it's hard as a competitor, another transition, that is not about you. And you have to really unlearn that piece of it. And Morgan, I agree with you. You won't make it very long if you continuously make it about you, because there's too many people involved to make it about you. So I think it is totally problematic. I think that I was really lucky in some senses, because I think I was almost so green, I just didn't even know what I didn't know. So you kind of just like are like, okay, we can do this. It's awesome. 25 of all this energy. And then definitely things shifted for me after my first 4 years. But I would be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't making it about me at some point in that journey in the beginning, because I was.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's real. And something that this brings to mind is that this idea of like us turning sport into an idol, we do it as athletes 100%, and we do it as coaches too. And something that Bex and I talk about all the time is that a lot of times coaches, you're just an older, depending on where you're at, older version of your athletes. So whatever questionable stuff you figured out as an athlete, you just perpetuate the same thing to your athletes now that you're a coach. And I do think that that's us idolizing our sport, or putting too much of our identity into what we do, is 100% prevalent, both in terms of being an active athlete and in terms of being a coach. So my question for you guys is, how difficult is it, particularly when you transition straight from sport into coaching? Like there's not this like in-between period for you. How difficult is it to kind of decouple our identity with what we do in coaching? And then the follow-up question for that is, you know, what makes it hard? Like it's unique in coaching compared to athletes, but yeah, what makes it hard when we root our identity in our coaching, in our sport? What do you think? What do you guys think?
Well, I think anytime we're rooting our identity in anything other than Christ, we're going down a really rough road. And I know for me, my identity was absolutely, maybe not in the beginning. That first year in England, it was a great transition for me. I wasn't thinking about it as a career. I kind of was thinking about it as a gap year. But so my identity, I didn't know what my identity was going to be yet. I didn't know Christ. I just was just trying to figure out, okay, what's my life going to look like? This is kind of a fun thing to do for right now. But when I stepped into the head coaching position at Dickinson, my identity was totally wrapped up in my success as a coach. And when you do that, the downside of that is you ride the roller coaster of wins and losses and whether your team likes you or they don't. And, I can tell you stories of seasons where my team loved me and then the next year they hated me. And I really wasn't that different of a person. So you're like, I didn't really change that much, but like you guys loved me last year and this year, like I can't even say one thing right. So I think if you put your identity in that, you are going to have super high highs and then you're going to have super low lows. And I just remember many, many times throughout my season, just like sobbing in my car, like because I felt so wounded by my identity in my coaching. If it was a bad day, it was like all consuming. Yeah. And so it's really, really detrimental, I think, because it's such a high low kind of profession that, yeah, it's really hard to root your identity in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you are so not alone within that. I feel like that's something I've talked to so many coaches about. It's just that aspect of like, just that transition into like, okay, we're winning. I can say the sky is blue, but everyone's like, the sky's blue. And then we lose 2 games in a row and it's like, the sky is blue. And they're like, yep. Kind of periwinkle. I don't know what she's talking about right now. Like, I don't see why she's seeing that. Like, what is she talking about? So I totally feel you on that one. The whole identity piece, I think, is just so important. And that's something as a coach now, I feel like I'm constantly trying to like preach to our athletes that you're so much more than a soccer player, so much more than an engineering major. You're so much more than so-and-so's daughter or whatever. Like there's so many aspects within that. And I think I make that like one of my like war paths as a coach, because that's something that I really struggled with as a player. And especially when I had my injuries, I was like, what am I now? Like, I'm just injured and I'm an athlete. Like I'm a soccer player. I'm a goalkeeper. I'm a soccer player. Like that's who I am. And when that was like stripped of me, that was so difficult and all consuming. And then as I went through, I talked a little bit about like being bitter with how my soccer career like panned out and ended. And I carried that through the beginning of my coaching career. And I was trying to like, I was maybe like 3 months older than some of our seniors as I first started in the college game as a volunteer. And I'm like, I'm trying to lead them when I can barely like lead myself right now. And I felt like I was trying to act or like fit in the box of what I thought like a young female coach was supposed to be. And like, you can't be too passionate because then you're obnoxious, and you can't be girly because then you're not competitive enough, because you can't do those things at the same time. And like, I think one of the biggest things like within that is I've had to like discover like who my authentic self is and be fine with creating that as I go. I don't remember what the whole question was to begin with. Now I feel like I'm on just a whole, which is fully how I operate. If you ask any of our goalkeepers, I'm like all over the place and then it circles back. But no, I just think the whole identity aspect is just such an important thing to be grounded with, and trying to preach that you have to be grounded within that and who you're truly representing at the end of the day, which is, God, everybody upstairs watching over.
Yeah. So it's good that you went in this direction, because I do have a follow-up question to that of like, where do you guys go or how do you deal in times when, the sky is not blue for you, but you have to say that to your team because they need to be confident. So that's my follow-up question. But in response to what both of you guys were saying, I think, just as much as athletes feel this pressure to perform and produce, coaches feel that pressure too, right? Especially if you're in a situation where your job depends on it. I think in the high school game, not as much, but definitely in the college game. In rec sports, it's rec sports. What's going to happen? Kid leaves and goes to another team. Okay, cool, but you still have a job. So it's not really the same thing. But I think that, yeah, it can be really, really like challenging to root your identity in your sport and in a way that is separate from Christ, who reaffirms who we are, kind of regardless of how well we succeed, because of that pressure to produce. And I think, I've seen in the moments where I've been the most frustrated with our athletes throughout whatever season, it doesn't matter, is when it seems like I want it way more than they want it. And then I have to evaluate for it within myself. Okay, but why do I want this more? Am I just being competitive right now, which is good and bad depending on the situation? Or have I put so much of myself into my ability to produce, which means this team's going to be successful, which means I'm worth something.
Yep.
That I've now chosen that now every result is life or death for me. That's how dramatic it feels in my brain, even though I know that's not how life work actually is. So yeah, so I think that's why it's so important for us to, just as much as we say, hey, more than an athlete, you see t-shirts and Instagram posts all over the place, like you're more than an athlete. The same messaging needs to get pointed to our coaches to be like, hey, you're more than this too. And not just put all the onus on coaches to like say that's their athletes. But my follow-up question, as I mentioned before, but I'll just reiterate it before I went on a tangent, is what helps you guys, or where do you guys go when coaching is hard for a number of reasons? Either the result hasn't been where you want it to go, the athletes are really trying your patience, or just things outside of the arena. We both play on a field, so I can play a field. I can say field. The field that you step on, things outside of it are just affecting your ability to be a best coach. Where do you guys go?
I feel like I rely on kind of two sources. One would definitely be my mom. But I feel like within that, we always tell our athletes, like, your parents are going to be the first one to be like, no, you totally deserve that, and they're wrong, and da da da. And like, my mom will check me like 95% of the time, but I also know that there's that 5% where she's like, no, you didn't do anything wrong, and da da da. And I'm like, no, tell me I'm wrong, and I need to suck it up and get over it. But then I also rely a bunch on just different coaches. Probably the one I rely the most on would be, he was my coach at LSU, and then the one that I worked alongside at Loyola, just because he has so much wisdom, and he is such like just a pure soul that he kind of like grounds me within that. And it is like, trust the process. Like he has been through like the highest highs and the lowest lows throughout his career, and he's stayed steady, which I know is something we talked about earlier. That's so hard, but he's so rooted within his just values and who he is. And he's somebody that I can like bounce stuff off of all the time. And he just kind of like helps me through that process of like, no, this is not like your identity. This is not like, a win is a win, a loss is a loss, but like, you're still in this for the right reason. You're still going to have times you fall on your face and times that you get it right, but that does not make that you're a good person or a bad person at the end of the day. So he's somebody I rely on like a lot. Shout out Kevin Dempsey. He's a gem. Great human.
Love it. What do you think, Case?
So when I was in coaching, I would say there was two people I always went to. One, my dad, because he had coached and still does coach for a really long time. And my dad doesn't sugarcoat anything. So he's not the type of person that's going to be like, oh, he's going to be like, you had a bad day today, Case. He didn't do a good job. So I always knew that I would get, a straight answer from him. And he had tons of experience. And then my college coach, because I just really, really value my relationship with her and her perspective on coaching. And so those were the two people I would go to the most when I was really struggling. I have to say that in retrospect, because I came to Christ my last year of coaching, I really wish I had that Christian community. I think that both my dad and my former coach, Kara, were amazing, but didn't know the Lord. And so I think, that roller coaster still goes, right? Like if you don't have that solid foundation, that roller coaster still goes. And so I'm thankful for the ways in which FCA really values serving coaches in this way and providing a community for them, because I really wish I had it. I think I would have been in a lot better place if I had been surrounded by people who would have pointed me back to Christ and said, hey, like what you said, Chris, is so on point. Like, I'm frustrated that we're losing because that reflects on me. and my worth is in whether or not I'm good as a coach or other people think I'm good as a coach. And so if you don't know Christ, or you're not surrounding yourself that are pointing you back to Christ, that your worth is not in the win or loss. You could do your best and they could lose. You could do your best, they could win, but your worth isn't what Christ did for you on the cross. Like I think it would have helped me so much in my coaching career. And I stepped out of coaching after my first year of coming to the Lord and haven't gone back to it. But I kind of wish I had had that type of mentorship during my time.
All right, guys, that is a wrap for part 1 of this episode. Tune in later this month for part 2. Don't forget to hit the red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere where podcasts are shown. You will find us at Behind the Mask 3132. We will post part 2. We hope that you guys have been blessed by part 1. I know I have so far, and trust me, there's so much more goodness in part 2. So as always, follow us on Instagram at Behind the Mask 3132. We welcome your thoughts from coaches, from athletes. What can we do to be more well-adjusted people and be more well-adjusted athletes and coaches? So until next time, you guys, we'll catch you later.